11-year-old boy bursts into a police station during a stormy night, clutching his baby sister and shouting, "Arrest my mom!" What would drive a child to make such a heart-wrenching plea? As officers dig deeper, a tale of sacrifice, love, and resilience unfolds, one that will leave you speechless. Before we dive into this gripping story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss future updates. Rain lashed against the cracked windows of Charleston's aging police station, the wind howling like a distant warning. Inside, the faint hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional shuffle of papers painted a picture of quiet routine. That calm was shattered when the heavy glass doors slammed open, letting in a burst of rain and an unexpected visitor. A small boy, drenched from head to toe, staggered inside, clutching a bundle wrapped tightly in a tattered blanket. Water dripped from his oversized jacket, pooling onto the faded linoleum floor. His chest heaved as if every breath was a struggle, but his voice cut through the station with a startling clarity. "Please arrest my mom." Officer Claire Monroe, seated at her desk sorting through case files, froze mid-motion. The words hung in the air, alien and heart-wrenching. She turned her gaze to the boy, her seasoned eyes catching every detail. His thin frame trembling under soaked clothes, his worn sneakers leaving faint watermarks, and, most striking, his wide, desperate eyes. "Somebody get towels," Claire called out, her voice calm but urgent. Rising from her chair, she approached the boy slowly, careful not to startle him. Her knees ached as she knelt to his level, but she ignored the pain, focusing on the trembling figure before her. "Hey there," she said softly, her southern drawl carrying warmth. "What's your name, sweetheart?" The boy hesitated, clutching the bundle tighter. From the folds of the damp blanket, a tiny, pale face peeked out. His baby sister. The infant's labored breaths and flushed cheeks told Claire more than words ever could. Her maternal instincts kicked in and she reached out gently, her eyes meeting the boy's. "I'm Elijah," he whispered, his voice raspy from the cold. "And this is Emma, my sister." "Elijah," Claire repeated, her tone as steady as an anchor. "You're safe now, both of you are. Let's get you somewhere warm." Elijah nodded reluctantly, allowing her to guide him toward the break room. Around them, officers exchanged glances, their curiosity piqued. But Claire's firm look kept questions at bay. In the break room, the dim fluorescent lights flickered intermittently. Claire draped a towel around Elijah's shoulders, while Officer Bennett, a younger cop, handed her a steaming cup of cocoa. She placed it in front of Elijah, who settled into a chair, Emma still cradled protectively in his arms. As the warmth began to seep into his bones, Elijah looked up at Claire. His lip quivered, but determination underpinned his next words. "You have to arrest my mom before she hurts herself." The weight of his plea landed like a stone in Claire's chest. She glanced at Emma, who coughed weakly in his arms, and then back at Elijah. "What happened, Elijah? Why do you think your mom needs to be arrested?" He hesitated, staring into the cocoa as if searching for the right words. She stole baby formula today," he admitted, his voice breaking. "The store manager caught her, but he let her go. When we got home, she started crying. She kept saying she's no good, that we'd be better off without her." Tears welled in his eyes as his voice dropped to a whisper. "I'm scared she's going to do something bad." Claire's heart tightened. She reached out, placing a reassuring hand on Elijah's small shoulder. "You were brave to come here," she said, her voice low but steady. "I promise we'll figure this out. You and Emma are not alone." As she spoke, Claire noticed Emma's cough worsening. The baby squirmed, her tiny fists clenching against Elijah's jacket. "Has Emma been sick for long?" she asked. Elijah nodded, his tears falling freely now. "She's been coughing for weeks. Mom couldn't afford the medicine the doctor said she needed. The apartment, it's cold and damp all the time." Claire's mind raced. This wasn't just a child crying for help. This was a family in crisis. The damp apartment, the illness, the mother's mental state, all pieces of a puzzle that painted a bleak picture. "We'll start with Emma," Claire decided aloud. "She needs to see a doctor, and we need to get you both somewhere warm tonight. Then we'll talk to your mom and figure out the rest. Does that sound okay?" Elijah hesitated, looking down at his sister. He finally nodded, his trust in Claire's calm demeanor overriding his initial fear. "Thank you," he whispered. For the first time that evening, relief flickered in his eyes, though the worry never fully left his face. Outside, the rain continued its relentless assault, a backdrop to the quiet storm brewing within the Harper family. As Claire rose to arrange for medical attention and temporary shelter, she couldn't shake the weight of Elijah's words. "Before she hurts herself." The soft hum of the patrol car's engine filled the silence as Claire drove Elijah and Emma to a nearby urgent care clinic. Rain streaked the windows, reflecting the dim orange glow of streetlights. Elijah's small frame sat rigid in the passenger seat, his arms still cradling Emma, who had dozed off despite her labored breathing. Claire glanced at him, noting the dark circles under his eyes and the tension in his shoulders. The boy carried far more than any child his age should. At the clinic, the doctor's quiet murmurs confirmed Claire's fears. Emma had a respiratory infection exacerbated by cold, damp conditions. While the baby was treated and given antibiotics, Elijah sat quietly in the waiting room, hands folded tightly in his lap. When Claire returned, he looked up, his voice small but determined. "You said we'd talk about my mom. What are you going to do?" Claire knelt down to meet his gaze. "I'm going to help her. But to do that, I need to understand what's been happening at home. Can you tell me more about her? About what she's been going through?" Elijah hesitated, his lip trembling. "It's not her fault," he started. "She tries. But it's been hard since Emma was born. She cries a lot. At night when she thinks I'm asleep. Sometimes she doesn't get out of bed for days." His words poured out in fragments, a patchwork of memories stitched together with pain. He described their one-bedroom apartment, the damp walls and leaking ceiling, how the landlord, Mr. Willoughby, came by every week to remind them about the rent they couldn't pay, how his mom skipped meals to make sure Elijah and Emma had food, though it was never enough. After Emma got sick, Mom said she'd figure it out, but no one would hire her. They all said the same thing: too much history. I didn't know what that meant at first, but I think it's because of what happened before. Elijah's voice faltered, and he looked away. Claire waited, giving him the space he needed. When he continued, his voice was barely a whisper. "She went to jail once, before Emma. She doesn't talk about it, but I heard her say it was because of someone named Marcus. I think he hurt her." The name hung in the air like a dark cloud. Claire's mind churned, piecing together what little she knew with what Elijah had just revealed. A criminal record, financial instability, and now a sick baby. It was a vicious cycle that seemed almost impossible to escape. "Does anyone help you?" she asked gently. Elijah shook his head. "We don't have anyone, just each other." His voice cracked, and he added, "She loves us, you know. She doesn't think she's enough." Claire reached out, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. "Elijah, your mom's doing the best she can. And now you have me. We're going to make sure you and Emma are okay and that your mom gets the help she needs." As they left the clinic, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. Back in the car, Elijah stared out the window at the blurred lights of the city. "Do you think she'll be mad?" he asked suddenly. "Mad about what?" Claire responded. "For bringing Emma here, for telling you everything." Claire thought for a moment before answering. "She might be upset at first, but deep down she'll know you did it because you care about her, because you love her." Elijah nodded, though doubt lingered in his eyes. The car turned down a narrow street lined with weathered buildings, each more worn than the last. When they reached the Harper's apartment, Elijah hesitated at the door. "Mom doesn't trust people. She says they just want to take us away." Claire crouched down beside him. "I'm not here to take you away. I'm here to help. Can you trust me, Elijah?" The boy hesitated, then nodded, his small hand tightening on the doorknob. He pushed it open, revealing a dim, damp apartment filled with an oppressive silence. In the corner, Naomi Harper sat hunched over a kitchen table, her face hidden in her hands. At the sound of the door, she looked up, her tired eyes narrowing when she saw Claire. "What's this?" she demanded, her voice defensive and cracked. Elijah, why'd you bring her here? Elijah stepped forward, his voice steady despite his fear. Mom, Emma's sick. She needed help, and I'm scared for you too. Naomi's face crumpled, her anger dissolving into exhaustion. Claire stepped forward, her tone calm but firm. Miss Harper, I'm here to listen, not to judge. Let's talk about what's going on. For a long moment, the only sound was Emma's soft breathing and the faint drip of water from a leaky faucet. Finally, Naomi nodded, her defenses faltering. Okay, she whispered, but just talk. Naomi Harper sat stiffly at the kitchen table, her hands clutching a chipped mug filled with lukewarm tea. The steam had long dissipated, and the faint sound of Emma's breathing filled the silence. Claire Monroe sat across from her, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to the tension radiating from Naomi. Elijah stood nearby, glancing anxiously between his mother and Claire. The walls of the dim apartment seemed to close in, the peeling wallpaper and faint mildew smell emphasizing the heaviness in the air. You want to talk? Naomi's voice was sharp, defensive. Fine, let's talk. But don't think for a second I don't know what this is about. Claire leaned forward slightly, her tone soft but firm. Naomi, I'm not here to take your children or judge you. I'm here to understand what's going on and see how we can help. Naomi scoffed, her tired eyes narrowing. Help? That's funny. The last time someone tried to help, I ended up behind bars. Elijah shifted uncomfortably, his small hands clenching into fists. Mom, please. Claire glanced at Elijah, then back to Naomi. He's worried about you, and after what he told me tonight, I am too. Naomi's shoulders slumped, the sharp edge of her voice giving way to something deeper, resignation. She exhaled shakily and set the mug down with a clatter. You want to know what's going on? I'll tell you, but don't act surprised when it's not a pretty story. Her words spilled out in fragments, like a dam breaking under pressure. Naomi spoke of her ex, Marcus Reed, a man who had once charmed her with promises of stability and a better life. The charm quickly faded, replaced by control and manipulation. He used me, Naomi said bitterly, her fingers tracing invisible patterns on the table. At first, it was small things, opening accounts in my name, putting bills in my name. Then it got worse. He made me sign for loans, credit cards. When I refused, he made sure I didn't refuse again. Claire's expression remained steady, though her chest tightened at Naomi's implication. Did he hurt you? Naomi hesitated, her jaw tightening. Not in ways you'd see, but yes. And when everything came crashing down, he ran. Left me to deal with the cops, the debt, everything. I spent 2 years in prison while he disappeared into thin air. Elijah stared at his mother, his wide eyes brimming with tears. Mom, I didn't know. Naomi reached for his hand, her voice softening. I didn't want you to know, baby. You were too little to understand. Claire allowed a moment of silence before speaking again. And now? What's happening now? Naomi's face hardened. He's back, or at least he's making it clear that he could be. Notes on my door, phone calls I don't answer. He knows about Emma, and that scares me more than anything. What does he want? Claire asked, her voice steady. I don't know, Naomi admitted, her voice trembling. Maybe to punish me, to remind me I'll never escape him. Or maybe he just enjoys watching me squirm. The weight of her words hung in the air, and Claire felt the urge to reach across the table to offer more than words. But she knew better. Naomi's defenses were fragile, her trust hard-earned. Naomi, Claire began carefully, you've been through so much already. But I need you to trust me. Marcus doesn't have to control your life anymore. Naomi laughed bitterly, shaking her head. You don't get it. People like me, we don't get a clean slate. It doesn't matter what I do. My past follows me everywhere. Every job application, every landlord, every side-eye from someone who thinks they know my story. It's all there, written in bold letters. Naomi Harper, convict. Elijah's voice broke through the tension, small but determined. You're not just that, Mom. You're my mom, and Emma's. That's what matters. Tears welled in Naomi's eyes, but she quickly blinked them away. You don't understand, Elijah. You're still a kid. The world doesn't give second chances. Then we'll make them, he replied firmly, his small hand gripping hers. We don't give up. Claire watched the exchange, her heart swelling with admiration for the boy's quiet strength. She knew there were no easy solutions here, But she also knew she couldn't leave this family to fend for themselves. "We're going to take this one step at a time," Claire said finally, her voice resolute. "First, we make sure Emma gets better. Then we figure out how to deal with Marcus. You're not alone in this, Naomi. Not anymore." Naomi hesitated, her defenses cracking under the weight of exhaustion and fear. "I don't even know where to start," Claire smiled faintly. "We start with trust, and we'll go from there." Outside, the rain had stopped, but the storm in Naomi's life was far from over. Yet, for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward. The apartment was silent after Claire left, but the weight of the conversation lingered like a thick fog. Naomi sat on the couch staring at her trembling hands. Elijah had finally drifted to sleep beside Emma's crib, exhaustion from the night's events overwhelming his small body. The soft sound of Emma's breaths brought a fleeting sense of calm, but Naomi's mind churned. Trusting someone like Claire felt foreign, a risk she wasn't sure she could afford. Morning came reluctantly, with dim light filtering through the curtains. Naomi glanced at the clock, realizing she hadn't slept. Her body moved on autopilot, heating water for oatmeal while her thoughts remained trapped in the past. She hadn't spoken Marcus's name in years, yet now his shadow loomed larger than ever. The sound of Elijah stirring broke her reverie. "Morning, baby," she said softly as he rubbed his eyes, his usual energetic demeanor dulled by fatigue. "Oatmeal's ready." Elijah shuffled to the table, his gaze lingering on his mother's face. "Did you sleep at all?" he asked. Naomi forced a small smile. "I'll be fine. Eat up, okay?" But Elijah wasn't satisfied. "Are we going to be okay, Mom? Like, really okay?" Her chest tightened at the question. How could she promise him safety when her world felt so fragile? "I'm going to do everything I can to make sure we are," she said, her voice wavering. "That's a promise." Later that afternoon, a sharp knock on the door made her freeze. For a moment, her heart raced, her mind conjuring images of Marcus on the other side. When she finally opened the door, she found Ruth Abner, the landlord, standing there with her usual no-nonsense expression. "Rent's overdue, Naomi," Ruth said, her arms crossed. "You've got until the end of the month, or I'll have no choice but to find a new tenant." Naomi swallowed hard, her hands gripping the doorframe. "I just need a little more time, Ruth. I'll figure something out." Ruth's gaze softened slightly, but her tone remained firm. "I've been patient, but patience doesn't pay the bills." As Ruth walked away, Naomi closed the door and leaned against it, her knees threatening to give out. Elijah appeared from the bedroom, worry etched on his face. "What did she want?" he asked. "Just grown-up stuff," Naomi replied, forcing a calm tone. "Don't worry about it." But Elijah's sharp eyes caught the tension in her shoulders. "I can help, Mom. Maybe I can draw pictures and sell them or something." Naomi knelt in front of him, brushing his curls away from his face. "You already do more than enough, sweetheart. Your job is to be a kid, okay?" That evening, as Elijah worked quietly on a drawing at the kitchen table, Naomi sat by Emma's crib. The baby's tiny chest rose and fell steadily, but her pale skin and persistent cough gnawed at Naomi's nerves. She thought back to her conversation with Claire, the officer's words echoing in her mind. "You're not alone in this. Not anymore." Could it really be true? Could she allow someone into the fortress she'd built to protect herself and her children? Her thoughts spiraled, landing on memories she tried desperately to suppress. She remembered the night Marcus had forced her to forge her first signature. His voice had been calm, almost kind, as he explained how necessary it was for their survival. When she hesitated, his grip on her wrist tightened, and his smile turned cold. That night marked the beginning of years of control, manipulation, and fear. Now he was back, or at least his presence lingered like a ghost. Every creak in the apartment, every shadow outside the window felt like him. She'd spent so long trying to bury the wounds he left behind, but they were impossible to ignore now. Elijah's voice broke through her thoughts. "Mom, do you think Miss Claire will come back?" Naomi looked at him, startled by the question. "Why do you ask?" He shrugged, his pencil hovering over his sketchpad. "I just think she really wants to help, and maybe we should let her." Naomi hesitated, her defenses warring with the glimmer of hope in Elijah's voice. "We'll see," she said finally, her tone softer than before. As night fell, the weight of her past and the uncertainty of her future pressed down harder than ever. Yet for the first time, she allowed herself to consider what it might mean to let someone in, to let someone help. The echoes of Naomi's struggles stayed with Claire as she stepped into her patrol car early the next morning. The air was heavy with mist, remnants of last night's rain clinging to every surface. Naomi's haunted expression lingered in her mind, as did the quiet resilience in Elijah's voice. It was clear that whatever Marcus had done, it had left scars too deep for Naomi to heal alone. Claire knew she needed to start untangling the web of problems suffocating the Harpers, and the first thread led to Morton's Grocery. Morton's Grocery sat at the corner of a busy Charleston street, its worn brick exterior blending into the patchwork of aging buildings. Inside, the hum of fluorescent lights mixed with the quiet chatter of early shoppers. Claire scanned the aisles until she spotted a young employee stocking shelves. "Excuse me," she said, flashing her badge. "I'm looking for Mr. Leonard, the manager." The employee pointed toward a small office tucked into the back of the store. Claire approached, knocking lightly on the doorframe. A balding man in his mid-50s looked up from a cluttered desk, his expression already brimming with impatience. "Yes?" he asked curtly. "Mr. Leonard, I'm Officer Claire Monroe. I'm here about an incident involving Naomi Harper." His eyes narrowed, his posture stiffening. "I didn't press charges, so I don't see why this is necessary." Claire met his defensive tone with calm resolve. "I'd still like to review the security footage from that day." Leonard hesitated, shuffling papers on his desk as if searching for an excuse. "She's one of those troublemakers," he muttered, "always looking for a handout." Claire's voice sharpened. "Mr. Leonard, I'm asking for your cooperation." Reluctantly, he led her to the surveillance room. The grainy footage showed Naomi standing at the counter, her face pale and strained. She clutched a can of formula, clearly debating whether to put it back. When the cashier accused her of theft, Naomi's attempts to explain were drowned out by the manager's loud commands. The video didn't show theft. It showed a mother overwhelmed by desperation. Claire pointed at the screen. "She didn't steal. She paid for the formula and tried to clarify. This could have been handled with more understanding." Leonard shrugged, his expression unapologetic. "She was acting suspicious. These people always are." Claire's patience frayed at the edges. "If by these people you mean struggling mothers trying to care for their children, then yes, I imagine they often appear desperate." Her tone was firm but controlled, refusing to give him room to argue. "This incident reflects poorly on your staff. I'd suggest additional training in customer relations." Leonard scowled but said nothing, his ego bruised by Claire's blunt assessment. She jotted down the exact time of the incident before leaving the office, her mind already racing ahead. As she walked through the store, she grabbed a basket and began filling it with essentials: baby formula, cough medicine, and some non-perishable groceries. At the register, she handed the cashier a $20 bill, making sure her receipt was printed clearly. Back in the car, she glanced at the bag of groceries on the passenger seat. It wasn't much, but it was a start. She would bring it to Naomi herself, along with the assurance that this was not the end of her fight. The rain had cleared by the time Claire reached the Harpers' apartment. The sun broke through low-hanging clouds, casting a faint warmth over the crumbling building. Claire knocked gently, and Naomi opened the door with a cautious look, her eyes darting toward the bag in Claire's hands. "What's this?" Naomi asked, her tone wary. "Just a few things for Emma," Claire replied, stepping inside. "And some news. I reviewed the footage from Morton's. You were telling the truth. You didn't do anything wrong." Naomi froze, her hands gripping the edge of the door. "They didn't believe me," she whispered, a mixture of relief and bitterness in her voice. "Well, I do," Claire said firmly, "and I'm here to help you clear your name." Naomi sat on the worn couch, clutching a mug of tea as if it were the only thing grounding her. Claire's words about clearing her name echoed in her mind, but doubt clung to her like the damp chill in the apartment. Could she really believe in help after so many years of disappointment? Across the room, Elijah sat with his sketchpad, glancing at his mother every few moments. His sharp eyes noticed the tension in her hands and the way she stared blankly ahead. After a moment of quiet, Elijah stood, setting his sketchpad aside. "Mom," he began hesitantly, what if, what if Marcus doesn't go away? What if he tries to hurt us?" Naomi's grip on her mug tightened. "I won't let him," she said, her voice firm but strained. "I'll protect you and Emma, no matter what." The resolve in her voice struck Elijah, but it wasn't enough to ease the growing fear in his chest. He knew his mother was strong, but Marcus seemed like a shadow neither of them could escape. That night, while Naomi rocked Emma to sleep, Elijah lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling. He thought about the note Marcus had left and the way his mother flinched at every sound outside their door. He couldn't let this continue. He had to do something. Early the next morning, before the sun had fully risen, Elijah quietly slipped out of bed. He dressed quickly, tucking his sketchpad under his arm. On his way out, he grabbed a jacket far too big for his small frame and quietly closed the apartment door behind him. The streets were eerily silent, the early morning fog wrapping around the weathered buildings like a ghostly shroud. Elijah pedaled his bike, his destination clear in his mind, the park where Marcus had been spotted lingering. If Marcus wanted to scare them, Elijah figured he'd start there. As he reached the edge of the park, the dew-drenched grass glistened in the soft morning light. Elijah's heart pounded as he scanned the area. He spotted a figure leaning against a lamppost, smoking a cigarette. The man's silhouette was unmistakable. It was Marcus. Elijah's hands tightened on his handlebars as he approached. His voice was steady, though his insides churned. "Marcus," he called out. The man turned, his face breaking into a slow, mocking grin. "Well, if it isn't the little man of the house," Marcus drawled, taking a long drag from his cigarette. "What brings you here, kid? Didn't Mommy warn you about strangers?" Elijah stood his ground, his fists clenched at his sides. "Leave us alone," he said, his voice firm. "You don't belong here." Marcus chuckled, his eyes narrowing. "Bold words for a kid. You think you can scare me off?" "I'm not scared of you," Elijah shot back, though his trembling hands betrayed him. "And I'm not going to let you hurt my mom or my sister." Marcus took a step closer, towering over the boy. "You don't get it, do you? Your mom owes me. You're just a little speed bump in my way." Elijah's mind raced, searching for a way to hold his ground. "She doesn't owe you anything," he said fiercely. "You took everything from her already." Marcus smirked. "You don't know the half of it, kid." Before Marcus could say more, a voice rang out from the edge of the park. "Elijah, what are you doing here?" Both turned to see Claire striding toward them, her expression a mix of shock and determination. Elijah's heart lifted at the sight of her, but Marcus's grin faded. "This is none of your business," Marcus snapped, his tone venomous. Claire stepped between Marcus and Elijah, her eyes locking on Marcus's. "It became my business the moment you started threatening this family," she said coldly. "Walk away now, before you make things worse for yourself." Marcus held her gaze for a tense moment, then scoffed, dropping his cigarette to the ground and crushing it under his boot. "This isn't over," he said, pointing a finger at Elijah. "You'll regret this." As Marcus stalked away, Claire turned to Elijah, her expression shifting to concern. "Are you okay?" Elijah nodded, though his hands were still shaking. "I had to do something," he said quietly. "I couldn't just sit there and let him keep scaring us." Claire knelt down, her voice gentle but firm. "I understand, Elijah, but this isn't something you should face alone. You were brave, but next time let me help, okay?" Elijah hesitated, then nodded. "Okay." As they walked back to the apartment, Elijah glanced up at Claire. "Do you think he'll come back?" Claire's jaw tightened. "He might, but we'll be ready for him." When they reached the apartment, Naomi was waiting at the door, her face pale with worry. "Elijah, where were you?" she demanded, pulling him into a tight embrace. "I wanted to protect us, Mom," he whispered, his voice muffled against her shoulder. Naomi's eyes filled with tears as she looked at Claire. "Thank you for bringing him back." Claire placed a reassuring hand on Naomi's shoulder. "We'll figure this out together," she said. "You're not alone anymore." Naomi couldn't stop pacing. The tension in the small apartment was suffocating, made worse by Elijah's earlier confrontation with Marcus. Claire had assured her they'd taken the first steps to ensure safety, but Naomi couldn't shake the gnawing fear that her past had finally caught up with her. Her anxiety deepened that afternoon when a knock at the door startled her. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. "It's okay, Mom. It's just the mail," Elijah said from the kitchen table, trying to calm her. But Naomi knew better. Mail didn't knock. She cautiously opened the door to find a woman in a crisp navy suit holding a leather portfolio. Her demeanor was polite, but her expression was firm. "Naomi Harper?" she asked. "Yes," Naomi replied, her voice shaky. The woman extended a card. "I'm Clara Evans from Child Protective Services. We've received a report regarding your children, and I'm here to conduct a welfare check." Naomi's stomach dropped. "A report? From who?" "I can't disclose that," Clara said, stepping inside. "This is standard procedure when there are concerns about the safety or well-being of children." Elijah appeared in the doorway, his eyes wide with worry. "Mom, what's going on?" "It's okay, Elijah," Naomi said, trying to steady her voice. She turned to Clara. "What do you need to see?" Clara surveyed the apartment, her gaze landing on the peeling wallpaper and the sparse furniture. Her pen moved quickly across the pages of her notepad. "I'll need to ask you some questions about your living situation, your employment, and your ability to provide for Elijah and Emma." Naomi felt her chest tighten. "I'm doing the best I can," she said defensively. "I've already started working again, and Claire Monroe can tell you how hard I'm trying." "Officer Monroe has mentioned your progress," Clara acknowledged, "but I still need to evaluate the circumstances myself." The conversation continued, with Clara's questions cutting deeper into Naomi's vulnerabilities. How much money did she earn? What was her plan for Emma's medical needs? Had she sought counseling for her past trauma? Each question felt like an accusation, and Naomi struggled to hold back tears. Elijah couldn't stay silent any longer. "She's doing everything for us," he blurted out. "She makes sure we have food, she reads to us, and she loves us more than anything." Clara looked at him, her expression softening slightly. "Thank you for sharing that, Elijah. Your input is important." When Clara finally left, Naomi collapsed onto the couch, her hands covering her face. "They're going to take you away," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I know they are." Elijah climbed onto the couch beside her, wrapping his arms around her shoulders. "They won't, Mom. I won't let them." Claire arrived soon after, her expression darkening as Naomi explained what had happened. "This is Marcus," Claire said firmly. "He's trying to scare you into giving up, but we won't let that happen." Naomi looked at her, desperation in her eyes. "What can I do? They're going to use my record against me." "We'll fight this," Claire assured her. "But first, we need to prove that you're doing everything you can for Elijah and Emma. I'll talk to Clara and make sure she understands the full picture." That night, Naomi sat at the kitchen table, her head in her hands. She thought about her children, Elijah's courage and Emma's innocent laughter, and felt a surge of determination. She wouldn't let Marcus win. She wouldn't let CPS take her children. As the apartment grew quiet, Elijah placed a drawing on the table in front of her. It showed their family standing together, surrounded by the faint outline of a shield. "We're stronger together, Mom," he said quietly. Naomi traced the lines of the drawing with trembling fingers, tears streaming down her face. "You're right," she whispered. "We are." The morning sunlight streamed through the apartment windows, casting soft patterns across the floor. Naomi sat at the table, staring at Elijah's drawing from the night before. The simple lines of the shield around their family stirred something deep within her, a fragile sense of hope. But hope alone wasn't enough. She needed action. Claire arrived just after breakfast, carrying a folder of papers and a determined expression. "We need to show Clara Evans and CPS that you're not just surviving. You're building a foundation for Elijah and Emma," Claire said as she set the folder down. "I've made some calls to local organizations that can help, but we need your okay to get started." Naomi hesitated, glancing at the folder. "What kind of help?" "Employment training, financial planning, even access to counseling services," Claire explained. "It's a lot, but it's going to strengthen your case and give you the tools to rebuild." Naomi exhaled slowly. Letting others into her life felt risky, but the alternative, losing her children, was unimaginable. "Okay," she said finally, "let's do it." Claire's first stop was the Helping Hands Community Center, a small but vibrant nonprofit located a few blocks away. When Naomi entered with Elijah and Emma, the welcoming space immediately eased some of her tension. Bright murals covered the walls and volunteers bustled about, their smiles warm and genuine. They were greeted by Maria, the center's director, whose enthusiasm was infectious. "Naomi, welcome," Maria said, shaking her hand. "We're here to support you, however you need." Maria led Naomi to a quiet office while Elijah stayed in the children's play area with Emma. The sound of laughter and soft music followed them as Maria began outlining the programs available. "We can help you create a budget, provide childcare while you attend workshops, and even connect you with employers willing to give second chances." Naomi's throat tightened. "Why would anyone want to help me?" Maria smiled gently. "Because everyone deserves a chance to start over, and because your children deserve to see their mom succeed." Naomi left the meeting with a binder full of resources and a tentative plan for the coming weeks. For the first time in years, she felt like she had a roadmap, though the journey ahead still felt daunting. That evening, Elijah shared his own news. "Miss Claire said there's an art contest at school," he said excitedly. "I want to enter, Mom. I think I could win." Naomi's heart swelled with pride. "Of course, sweetheart. What will you draw?" Elijah grinned. "Something about us, about how we're stronger together." While Elijah sketched in the living room, Naomi returned to the binder Maria had given her. The sections on job training caught her attention. Her record felt like an immovable wall, but Maria's words echoed in her mind. "Your past doesn't define your future." The next morning, Naomi dropped Emma off at the center's childcare program and joined a job readiness workshop. The room was filled with women from different walks of life, their stories as varied as their expressions. Some wore nervous smiles, while others radiated quiet determination. Naomi felt out of place at first, but as the instructor guided them through mock interviews and resume-building exercises, her confidence began to grow. By the end of the session, she had a polished resume and a clearer sense of her strengths. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Meanwhile, Claire continued working behind the scenes. She contacted Clara Evans, sharing updates on Naomi's progress and emphasizing her commitment to change. "She's not just trying, she's succeeding," Claire insisted, "and she's not alone in this." The community's support extended beyond the programs. Maria organized a donation drive for the Harpers, gathering groceries, clothing, and even art supplies for Elijah. When a group of volunteers arrived at the apartment with bags of items, Naomi was overwhelmed. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Just keep moving forward," Maria replied. "That's all the thanks we need." Elijah immediately dove into the art supplies, his excitement contagious. "Mom, look, I can finally use real paints for my contest." Naomi watched him with a mix of gratitude and awe. For the first time in years, her family wasn't just surviving, they were beginning to thrive. The community's kindness had given her the strength to keep going, and she silently vowed not to let their efforts go to waste. That night, as she tucked Elijah and Emma into bed, Naomi sat quietly by the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. The road ahead still felt uncertain, but for the first time she believed they could make it. Together, with the help of people who cared, they could build a better life. Naomi watched as Elijah bent over his new sketch pad, his tongue peeking out in concentration as he carefully blended colors with a brush. The light from the window illuminated his face, giving him an air of peaceful focus she hadn't seen in weeks. The community's support had done more than provide material help. It had ignited something new in Elijah, a sense of purpose and pride. "Mom, do you think this looks okay?" Elijah asked, holding up his painting. It depicted a mother and two children huddled together under an umbrella, with storm clouds breaking into sunshine above them. The details were intricate, each stroke reflecting his love and determination. Naomi's throat tightened as she examined the piece. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. It's exactly what we've been through. You're going to do amazing in that contest." Her words brought a shy smile to Elijah's face. He turned back to his painting, more confident now. For Naomi, seeing him pour his emotions into his art reminded her of how far they'd come. There were still battles ahead, but moments like this felt like victories. Later that day, Naomi attended her second job workshop, this time focused on interview skills. The instructor encouraged them to share their stories, how their pasts had shaped their determination to succeed. Naomi hesitated when it was her turn, but she forced herself to speak. "I used to think my mistakes defined me," she admitted. "But now I realize that those mistakes made me stronger. I'm here because of my kids. They're my reason for everything." The room filled with quiet nods of understanding, and Naomi felt a flicker of pride. For the first time, she wasn't ashamed to share her story. It was a part of her, but it wasn't the whole of her anymore. As the workshop ended, Maria approached Naomi with a flyer in hand. "There's an open house for a local daycare that's hiring," Maria said. "It's part-time and flexible. I think you'd be a great fit." Naomi took the flyer, her hands trembling. "You really think I could do this?" Maria smiled. "Absolutely. You've got everything they're looking for: patience, strength, and a heart that never gives up." Meanwhile, Elijah was busy preparing for the art contest at school. Claire stopped by with a few additional supplies and spent time encouraging him. "You're telling a story with your art, Elijah," she said, "and stories have the power to change how people see the world." Her words resonated deeply with Elijah. He worked tirelessly on his painting, staying up late to perfect every detail. Naomi worried he was pushing himself too hard, but she also saw how much joy and confidence the project gave him. The day of the art contest arrived, and Naomi dressed Elijah in his best clothes. He held his painting carefully, his nervous energy palpable. "What if they don't like it?" he whispered as they approached the school. Naomi knelt beside him, her hands resting on his shoulders. "It's not about whether they like it. It's about sharing a piece of yourself. That's what makes it special." Elijah nodded, his resolve strengthening. Inside the school gymnasium, students displayed their artwork on easels, and the walls were alive with color and creativity. Elijah's painting stood out, a vivid, emotional piece that captured resilience and hope. As the judges announced the winners, Naomi held her breath. When they called Elijah's name for second place, his face lit up with a mix of shock and pride. He walked up to accept his ribbon, glancing back at his mother, who clapped with tears in her eyes. That night, Elijah hung his ribbon on the fridge, and Naomi hugged him tightly. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered, "not just for winning, but for being brave enough to share your heart." Elijah beamed. "We're stronger together, right?" "Always," Naomi replied, her voice thick with emotion. She realized that while the road ahead would still be challenging, they had something Marcus could never take away: their bond, their courage, and their hope. The courthouse loomed large, its imposing stone facade casting long shadows across the street as Naomi, Claire, and Elijah approached. Naomi clutched Emma close to her chest, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. Elijah walked beside her, his small hand gripping her sleeve tightly. He had insisted on coming, his quiet resolve bolstering Naomi's courage. Inside, the marble floors echoed with the sound of hurried footsteps. Naomi took a deep breath, trying to steady herself as Claire guided her to a bench outside the courtroom. "Just remember," Claire said softly, her hand resting on Naomi's shoulder. "You've worked hard to show how much you love and provide for your kids. Let that speak for itself." Naomi nodded, though doubt gnawed at her. The memories of her past mistakes felt heavy, a constant reminder of how easily things could slip out of her control. The courtroom itself was smaller than Naomi had imagined, but no less intimidating. Dark wood panels lined the walls, and the judge's bench loomed at the far end, a silent reminder of the authority held within. Clara Evans sat at one table, her manila folder thick with notes and documents. At the other table, Naomi took her seat beside Claire, her stomach churning as the hearing began. Clara presented her report first, her voice clear and professional. While Miss Harper has made commendable efforts to improve her situation, her past record of incarceration and financial instability raised concerns about the long-term welfare of her children. Naomi's throat tightened as Clara outlined her findings, each point feeling like another strike against her. She fought to keep her composure, her hands gripping the edge of the table. When it was Claire's turn, she rose with calm confidence. Your Honor, Naomi Harper's past does not define her present or her future. She has taken every opportunity to create a stable environment for her children. She's working with community resources, attending job training, and most importantly, she has shown unwavering love and dedication to Elijah and Emma. Claire presented letters of support from Maria at the community center, Naomi's job readiness instructor, and even Elijah's art teacher. These letters demonstrate that Naomi is not alone in this. She has built a network of people who believe in her and are invested in her success. The judge's gaze shifted to Naomi. Miss Harper, do you have anything you'd like to say? Naomi stood slowly, her knees trembling. She glanced at Elijah, who gave her a small nod of encouragement. Taking a deep breath, she began. Your Honor, I know I've made mistakes, and I know that my past isn't something I can erase. But everything I do now is for my children. I've worked hard to give them a better life because they deserve it. Elijah is kind and brave, and Emma is just starting to grow. I want them to have a future full of possibilities, not fear. Please don't take them away from me. Her voice cracked and tears welled in her eyes, but she held her head high. The courtroom was silent for a moment before Elijah stood. Your Honor, he said, his small voice clear and steady. My mom is the best mom. She makes sure we have food, she helps me with my homework, and she makes us feel safe. She loves us more than anything. The judge's stern expression softened as he looked at the boy. Thank you for speaking, young man. As Elijah sat down, Naomi reached for his hand, squeezing it tightly. The judge leaned back in his chair, his gaze thoughtful. This is not an easy decision, he said finally. However, I see a mother who has faced significant challenges and is taking meaningful steps to overcome them. I also see a family bond that is strong and loving. Miss Harper, I am allowing you to retain custody of your children with the condition that you continue your progress and comply with check-ins from CPS. Naomi's breath left her in a rush, relief flooding her body. Tears streamed down her face as she hugged Elijah and Emma, her hands trembling with emotion. Thank you, she whispered, her voice barely audible. As they stepped outside into the bright sunlight, Naomi felt lighter than she had in years. Claire placed a hand on her shoulder. This isn't the end, Naomi, but it's a big step forward. Naomi nodded, her heart full. I won't let them down, she said firmly. You won't, Claire replied with a smile. And you're not doing this alone anymore. Elijah looked up at his mother, his eyes shining with hope. We did it, Mom. Naomi knelt down, pulling him into a hug. We did, she said softly. Together. The victory in court was still fresh in Naomi's mind as she walked home with Elijah and Emma, but the weight of her past still lingered. Marcus's threats weren't gone. They loomed like a storm waiting to break. She clutched Emma tighter, scanning the streets for anything or anyone out of place. Elijah, sensing her unease, stayed close by her side. Later that evening, Naomi locked every window and double-checked the doors before settling the children in bed. Elijah fell asleep clutching one of his sketches, but Naomi stayed awake, her ears attuned to every creak and rustle outside. Just as her exhaustion began to pull her under, a sudden pounding on the door shattered the silence. Naomi's heart leaped into her throat as she bolted upright. Mom! Elijah's frightened voice called from his room. It's okay, she lied, her voice trembling. Stay with Emma. She approached the door cautiously, her mind racing. Who is it? She demanded, her voice stronger than she felt. It's Tyrell. A familiar voice growled through the door. Open up, Naomi. We need to talk. Naomi froze. Tyrell was one of Marcus's old associates, a man who had always lingered on the fringes of her life like a shadow Marcus couldn't shake. His sudden reappearance felt like the final blow. I have nothing to say to you, she said firmly, her hand gripping the doorframe. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Tyrell warned. Marcus doesn't like unfinished business. You don't want him coming back, do you? Naomi's blood ran cold, but before she could respond, Claire's voice rang out from the hallway. Is there a problem here? Naomi peeked through the peephole and saw Claire standing tall, her badge visible under the dim hallway light. Tyrell turned to face her, his expression shifting to feigned innocence. Just a friendly visit, he said smoothly. Friendly visits don't involve pounding on doors at midnight, Claire replied sharply, stepping closer. Leave now, or I'll make sure this visit ends at the station. Tyrell sneered but took a step back. Tell Marcus he's wasting his time, Claire added, her tone ice cold. Naomi's not alone anymore. Tyrell muttered something under his breath before retreating down the hallway. Claire waited until his footsteps faded before knocking softly on the door. Naomi, it's safe now. Naomi opened the door, her face pale but resolute. Thank you, she whispered. Claire stepped inside, her sharp gaze sweeping the apartment. He's not going to stop, she said grimly. We need to take this further. Naomi nodded, her fear now mingled with a growing determination. What can we do? The next morning, Claire brought Naomi to meet Detective Alan Peters. Sitting in the sterile conference room, Naomi recounted every detail about Marcus and his network, including Tyrell's threats. Alan took meticulous notes, his expression serious. Marcus Reed has a history, Alan said finally. But we need something concrete to bring him in, something that ties him directly to these recent threats. What about the notes? Naomi asked. The calls? Alan nodded. They help, but we need more. If you're willing, we can set a trap, something to draw him out. The idea terrified Naomi, but she also knew it might be the only way to end Marcus's hold over her family. What do I need to do? She asked, her voice steady. Alan outlined the plan. Naomi would agree to meet Marcus in a public place, ostensibly to settle their unfinished business. Claire and Alan, along with a team of undercover officers, would be nearby, ready to intervene. It was risky, but Naomi agreed. The next evening, Naomi sat nervously on a park bench, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. The cold air bit at her skin, but she hardly noticed. Across the street, Claire waited in an unmarked car, her eyes never leaving Naomi. Marcus arrived right on time, his confident swagger making Naomi's stomach churn. Naomi, he said smoothly, sitting beside her. Long time no see. Let's make this quick, she replied, her voice clipped. What do you want? Marcus leaned back, his smirk infuriatingly calm. Just a little repayment for old time's sake. You owe me. I don't owe you anything, Naomi shot back, her voice rising. You ruined my life, and I'm done letting you control me. Marcus's smile vanished, replaced by a dangerous glint in his eyes. You're making a mistake, he hissed, leaning closer. Before he could say more, Claire and Alan appeared, their badges flashing. Marcus Reed, Alan said firmly. You're under arrest for harassment, extortion, and multiple outstanding warrants. Marcus's face twisted in fury as officers cuffed him, but Naomi didn't flinch. For the first time in years, she felt free. As the squad car pulled away, Claire placed a reassuring hand on Naomi's shoulder. You did it, she said softly. Naomi exhaled, her shoulders sagging with relief. We did it, she corrected, glancing at Claire. Thank you. The arrest of Marcus Reed was a victory, but the battle was far from over. Naomi spent the following days trying to reclaim a sense of normalcy, but her lingering fear told her that Tyrell and Marcus's network might still pose a threat. The community's support remained steadfast, with Claire and Detective Alan keeping a close watch, but Naomi couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. One crisp evening, as Naomi tucked Emma into her crib, the sound of Elijah's voice from the living room gave her pause. Mom, there's someone outside, he called softly. Naomi's heart leaped into her throat. She peeked through the window, her eyes scanning the dimly lit street. A dark figure lingered near the corner, their movements deliberate and unsettling. Panic welled in her chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. Elijah, lock the door and stay with Emma, she instructed, her voice steady despite the pounding in her ears. Before she could grab her phone to call Claire, the figure began to move closer. A sharp knock rattled the front door. Naomi froze, her instincts screaming to protect her children. She whispered a silent prayer, clutching her phone tightly as she dialed Claire's number. Claire, someone's outside, Naomi said, her voice trembling. Stay calm, Claire replied firmly. I'm on my way. Don't open the door. Minutes felt like hours as Naomi stood in the hallway, her back pressed against the wall near Emma's crib. Elijah crouched beside her, his small frame trembling, but his resolve unshaken. It's going to be okay, she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she believed it herself. The pounding on the door grew louder, more insistent. Naomi tightened her grip on her phone, glancing at the clock. Claire would be here soon. She just had to hold on. A sudden crash shattered the silence as the front window splintered inward. Glass scattered across the floor, and Naomi instinctively shielded Elijah. The dark figure climbed through the broken window, his face partially obscured by a hood. It was Tyrell. "You think Marcus going to jail changes anything?" Tyrell sneered, his voice low and menacing. "You still owe." Naomi's fear turned to fury. "Get out!" she shouted, her voice echoing through the small apartment. Tyrell took a step closer, but before he could say another word, a blinding beam of light flooded the room. "Police! Freeze!" Claire's voice rang out, followed by the sound of boots on the floorboards. Tyrell hesitated, his bravado faltering as Claire and two officers stormed in, weapons drawn. "Don't move," Claire ordered, her tone leaving no room for argument. Tyrell raised his hand slowly, his eyes darting toward the window as if considering an escape. One of the officers quickly restrained him, snapping handcuffs around his wrists. "You're done," Claire said coldly. "Breaking and entering, terroristic threats. You're going away for a long time." Naomi's legs gave out, and she sank to the floor, her arms wrapped protectively around Elijah. "It's over," she whispered, her voice shaking with relief. "It's finally over." Claire knelt beside her, her expression softening. "You're safe now, Naomi. We've got him." As Tyrell was escorted out, Naomi hugged Elijah tightly, her tears spilling freely. She glanced at Emma, who had somehow slept through the commotion, her tiny chest rising and falling peacefully. For the first time in what felt like forever, Naomi allowed herself to believe they were truly free. The following morning, Naomi met with Detective Allen at the precinct. He assured her that both Marcus and Tyrell would face significant charges and that the police would continue to monitor her case. "You've been through so much," Allen said, his voice kind, "but you've shown incredible strength." Back at home, the apartment felt lighter. Claire helped Naomi clean up the broken glass, and neighbors stopped by to check on her. Elijah even managed a small smile as he helped Naomi rearrange the furniture. "We're okay now, Mom," he said quietly. "Aren't we?" Naomi nodded, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "Yes, baby, we're okay." That night, as the apartment settled into a calm silence, Naomi sat by the window, watching the city lights. The scars of the past would take time to heal, but she knew now that she wasn't alone. With her children, her community, and her own newfound resilience, she was ready to face whatever came next. The morning after Tyrell's arrest, Naomi stood at the window, sipping a cup of coffee and watching the world outside. For the first time in months, she felt the tension in her shoulders ease. The looming threats of Marcus and his accomplices had always been a shadow over her life, but now that shadow was gone. Elijah sat at the kitchen table, adding the final touches to his latest painting. Emma giggled in her high chair, babbling as she tried to grab the stuffed toy dangling from the tray. The apartment, though still modest, felt warmer, lighter, filled with a renewed sense of hope. Claire arrived later that morning carrying a folder and her usual air of determination. "Naomi," she began, placing the folder on the counter. "I've been talking to Maria at the community center and Detective Allen. We believe it's time to start planning for the future." Naomi smiled softly. "I thought that's what we've been doing." Claire shook her head, her tone gentle. "This time it's different. You're not just surviving anymore. You're rebuilding." The folder contained resources for a permanent job opportunity at the community daycare where Naomi had been volunteering. It also included information about affordable housing programs that would help her move into a larger, safer apartment. Naomi's breath hitched as she flipped through the pages. This feels like too much." "It's not," Claire reassured her. "You've earned every bit of it. You've proven you're willing to do whatever it takes for your family." The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Naomi attended interviews, worked extra shifts, and began packing up the apartment. Elijah, meanwhile, poured his energy into his artwork, his passion blossoming with each piece he completed. One afternoon, he proudly showed Naomi a painting he had been working on in secret, a vibrant depiction of their family standing under a radiant sun, their hands joined. "This is for our new home," Elijah said, his eyes shining. It's a fresh start for all of us. Naomi hugged him tightly, her voice breaking. It's beautiful, sweetheart, just like you. The day they moved into their new apartment was bittersweet. As Naomi looked around the empty walls of their old home, memories of their struggles came rushing back. But when she stepped through the door of their new place, with its clean, open spaces and large windows, she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. They had come so far. Their first night in the new apartment was quiet, but full of joy. Naomi cooked dinner in the small but modern kitchen while Elijah and Emma played on the living room floor. Afterward, they sat together on the couch, watching the city lights twinkle through the windows. Do you think everything's really going to be okay now? Elijah asked, his voice small but hopeful. Naomi wrapped an arm around him, pulling him close. I do, she said firmly, because we're together and we're stronger than ever. The next morning, Naomi began her new job at the daycare. The children's laughter and the warm, welcoming environment reminded her of why she had fought so hard. Her co-workers were supportive, and Maria, the director, made sure Naomi knew she belonged. In the afternoons, Naomi worked on budgeting and planning for the future, determined to ensure that her family never had to face such hardships again. She even began attending a support group for single mothers, finding solace and camaraderie in their shared experiences. As the days turned into weeks, Naomi felt a shift within herself. She was no longer defined by her mistakes or her past. She was defined by her resilience, her love for her children, and her determination to create a better life for them. One evening, as they sat together after dinner, Elijah pulled out his sketchbook. Mom, he said, holding up a new drawing, I think I want to be an artist when I grow up. Do you think I can? Naomi cupped his face in her hands, her eyes brimming with tears. Elijah, you can be anything you want to be, and I'll always be here to cheer you on. As they laughed and talked about the future, Naomi realized that they had truly entered a new chapter, one filled with possibility, hope, and a love that no hardship could ever break. The new apartment quickly became a canvas for the Harpers' hopes and dreams. Elijah's painting of their family, hands joined under a radiant sun, now hung proudly in the living room. Its vibrant colors seemed to breathe life into the space, serving as a daily reminder of how far they had come. Naomi watched her children thrive, the weight of the past slowly lifting from their lives. At the daycare, Naomi settled into her new role with surprising ease. The laughter of children and the camaraderie of her co-workers made every day rewarding. Maria often checked in with Naomi, her warm encouragement a constant source of motivation. You're a natural, Maria said one afternoon as Naomi comforted a crying toddler. These kids adore you, and it's clear you care deeply for them. Naomi smiled, her heart swelling with pride. She had once doubted her ability to create a stable life for Elijah and Emma, but now she felt like she was not just surviving, she was building something meaningful. Meanwhile, Elijah's passion for art continued to grow. His teachers praised his talent, and his confidence blossomed with each new project. Naomi made sure he had all the supplies he needed, saving a little from each paycheck to invest in his dreams. Elijah's latest creation, a series of sketches inspired by their journey, caught the attention of his art teacher, who encouraged him to submit his work to a local gallery's youth showcase. When Elijah told Naomi about the opportunity, his excitement was infectious. Do you think they'll pick me, Mom? He asked, his eyes wide with hope. Naomi knelt beside him, brushing a curl from his forehead. I think they'd be lucky to have your work, but no matter what happens, I'm proud of you for trying. On the day of the showcase, Naomi dressed Elijah in his best outfit and packed Emma's diaper bag, determined to make the event a family affair. As they entered the bustling gallery, Elijah's sketches were already displayed alongside other pieces, each telling a story of resilience and growth. Naomi's breath caught as she saw his work through the eyes of strangers, who paused to admire the raw emotion and intricate details he had poured into his art. That's my brother's, Emma declared loudly, pointing to one of the sketches and earning a chuckle from nearby patrons. Elijah's cheeks flushed with pride, but he couldn't hide his beaming smile. When the gallery director approached Elijah to present him with a special commendation for his artwork, Naomi felt tears well in her eyes. Your art speaks volumes, the director said. It's not just talent, it's heart. Keep telling your story. After the event, the family celebrated with pizza and laughter, their small victories weaving together into something much larger, hope for the future. That night, as Elijah carefully placed his commendation next to his ribbon from the school art contest, Naomi sat by the window, reflecting on how much they had overcome. A few days later, Claire visited with a surprise. "I've been talking to Maria and some of the folks at the community center," she said, handing Naomi a letter. "You've been nominated for the Rising Star Award. It's given to someone who's shown incredible perseverance and made a positive impact in the community." Naomi stared at the letter in disbelief. "Me? I don't understand. I'm just trying to do what's best for my kids." "And that's exactly why you deserve this," Claire said firmly. "Your story inspires people, Naomi. It shows them that change is possible." The award ceremony was modest but heartfelt, held at the community center with neighbors, friends, and supporters in attendance. When Naomi accepted the award, her voice trembled with emotion. "I never thought I'd be standing here," she said. "But I've learned that we don't have to walk through life alone. The love and kindness of others can change everything." As the applause echoed around her, Naomi glanced at Elijah and Emma in the front row, their faces glowing with pride. She knew this moment wasn't just about her. It was about them, their family, and the promising future they had worked so hard to create.